The morning sun barely peeked through the clouds when 17-year-old Maya stepped off the bus, clutching a worn folder against her chest. Inside were sheets of music that had been photocopied so many times the notes were starting to fade. She'd practiced from these same pages for 3 years now, and every crease and coffee stain had become familiar to her. Thornfield Conservatory stood before her like a castle from another world. The building was all marble columns and gleaming windows, with perfectly trimmed hedges lining the walkway. Maya had seen it in photos online, but nothing prepared her for how intimidating it looked in person. Students walked past her carrying instrument cases that probably cost more than her family's car. She smoothed down her navy blue dress, the nicest one she owned. Her mom had stayed up late the night before, pressing it carefully and fixing a loose button. The shoes on her feet were her school shoes, polished until they shined. But there were still scuff marks on the toes that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she tried. Taking a deep breath, Maya walked through the heavy wooden doors. The entrance hall took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the floors were so polished she could see her reflection. The walls were covered with portraits of famous musicians who had studied here, all of them looking dignified and important in their gold frames. A woman at the reception desk barely glanced up as Maya approached. "Name?" she asked, typing on her computer. "Maya Chen. I'm here for the piano audition." The woman's eyes flicked over Maya's appearance for just a second, and something in her expression changed. It was subtle, but Maya caught it. She'd seen that look before. The woman pointed down a hallway. "Third door on the left. Wait with the others." The waiting room was worse than Maya had imagined. About 15 other students sat in plush chairs, and every single one of them looked like they belonged here. A girl near the window wore a designer dress with actual jewelry, tapping away on the latest model phone. 2 boys in the corner discussed their summer programs at music camps in Europe. Another girl practiced finger exercises in the air, her movements so precise and trained that Maya could tell she'd had professional instruction since childhood. Maya found an empty chair in the back corner and sat down quietly. She placed her folder on her lap, suddenly very aware of how shabby it looked compared to the leather portfolios others carried. One boy had a tablet with digital sheet music. Another girl had a professional binder with her name embossed in gold letters. "So where did you study?" a voice asked. Maya looked up to see a girl with perfectly styled hair smiling at her. The smile seemed friendly enough, but there was curiosity in her eyes that felt more like judgment. I take lessons at my local church," Maya answered honestly. "Oh." The girl's smile froze for a moment. "That sounds nice. I studied at the Riverside Academy. My teacher trained at Juilliard." She turned back to her friends, and Maya heard whispers followed by quiet laughter. Maya felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to tell them that her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, might teach in a church basement, but she had more passion and dedication than anyone Maya had ever met. She wanted to explain that Mrs. Rodriguez never charged her family full price because she believed Maya had real talent, that she'd given Maya extra lessons for free, staying late after her other students went home. But Maya said nothing. She just opened her folder and pretended to study the music she already knew by heart. One by one, names were called. Each student would disappear through the audition room door, and 15 or 20 minutes later they'd emerge looking either triumphant or disappointed. The number of people in the waiting room slowly dwindled. Maya's hands started to sweat. She wiped them on her dress, then worried she might leave marks on the fabric. Her heart hammered in her chest so loudly she was sure others could hear it. She'd dreamed of this moment for years. This audition could change everything. A scholarship to Thornfield meant access to world-class teachers, real opportunities, maybe even a future career in music. Without it, she'd probably have to give up her dreams and find a practical job after high school to help her parents with bills. She thought about her mom, who worked double shifts at the hospital, coming home exhausted but always asking Maya to play something for her. Her dad, whose hands were rough and calloused from construction work, who'd insisted they find a way to pay for lessons even when money was tight. They believed in her. They'd sacrificed so much. Maya Chen. Her name jolted her from her thoughts. A stern-looking man stood at the audition room door, clipboard in hand. Maya gathered her folder with trembling fingers and stood up. Her legs felt unsteady as she walked across the room. The few remaining students watched her go, and she caught another one of those looks, that mixture of pity and dismissal. The audition room was enormous. A gorgeous grand piano sat in the center, its black surface so shiny it reflected the ceiling lights. Behind a long table sat 3 judges, all of them looking distinguished and important. The woman in the middle was older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Have a seat at the piano," the woman said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. She glanced down at her papers. Maya Chen, lessons at New Hope Community Church. There was a pause, and the woman exchanged a brief look with the judge beside her. Maya's stomach twisted. She sat down on the piano bench, which was positioned perfectly, more comfortable than the old creaky one she practiced on at home. The piano itself was beautiful, the keys smooth and responsive under her fingers as she tested them lightly. "What piece have you prepared for us today?" asked the male judge on the left. "I've prepared Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major and Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. 3rd movement," Maya said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. The 3 judges looked at each other. The woman in the middle, whose nameplate read Dr. Victoria Hartwell, set down her pen. "Those are ambitious choices," she said slowly. "Perhaps we should start with something simpler. Do you know Mozart's Minuet in G?" Maya blinked. Of course she knew it. It was a beginner's piece, something she'd learned in her first year of lessons. "Yes, but I prepared—" "Let's hear the Mozart first," Dr. Hartwell interrupted gently but firmly. "We need to assess your fundamentals before moving to more complex pieces." The other judges nodded in agreement. One of them was already looking at his watch. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. They didn't believe she could play what she'd prepared. They'd taken one look at her, seen her cheap folder and simple dress, heard where she took lessons, and decided she wasn't capable. They were asking her to play a children's song to prove she could even handle the basics. Her hands positioned themselves over the keys. The Mozart Minuet. Simple, pretty, safe. Exactly what they expected from someone like her. Maya's fingers touched the cool keys, and for a moment everything hung in balance. She could play what they asked, prove she could handle simple pieces and hope they'd give her a chance. Or she could do something else entirely. Her mother's tired smile flashed through her mind. Her father's proud expression when she played for him after dinner. Mrs. Rodriguez saying, "You have something special, Maya. Don't ever let anyone make you small." The judges waited, pens ready, barely paying attention. Maya began to play. The first notes of the Mozart Minuet filled the audition room. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with practiced ease, playing the simple melody that she could perform in her sleep. The piece was light and cheerful, the kind of music that belonged at a children's recital, not a prestigious conservatory audition. She could feel the judges relaxing behind her, their posture shifting as they confirmed what they'd already assumed. This was her level. This was all she could handle. The male judge on the left picked up his pen and started making notes, probably already writing his evaluation. The woman on the right stifled what might have been a yawn. Dr. Hartwell's eyes drifted back to the stack of folders on the table, likely thinking about the next candidate, someone from Riverside Academy or the Manhattan School of Music prep program, someone who looked the part and had the right background. Maya felt each note like a tiny surrender. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, moving through the piece with mechanical precision, but inside something was burning. This wasn't why she'd spent countless hours practicing in that church basement. This wasn't why Mrs. Rodriguez had believed in her, staying late every Thursday evening, teaching her pieces that were supposedly too advanced, too difficult for someone without formal training. The melody continued, sweet and simple and completely forgettable. Through the piano's polished surface, Maya could see her own reflection, distorted and dark. She thought about all the times she'd been underestimated. Teachers at school who'd seemed surprised when she got top grades. The guidance counselor who'd suggested community college instead of university. The kids at the bus stop who'd made fun of her second-hand backpack. She'd accepted it then. Stayed quiet, kept her head down, proved herself slowly over time. But something felt different now. Maybe it was seeing her parents' faces in her mind, remembering how her dad had worked overtime for 3 months straight to save up the audition fee, how her mom had researched this conservatory for hours, printing out information at the library because they didn't have a computer at home. They'd invested everything in this moment, not just money, but hope, faith, love. Or maybe it was thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd seen something in Maya that first day she'd wandered into the church. drawn by the sound of piano music drifting through the open doors. Mrs. Rodriguez hadn't asked about her background or her family's income. She'd just listened to Maya play, smiled, and said, "You have music in your soul, dear. Let me help you bring it out." The Mozart minuet was reaching its final section now. Just a few more measures and it would be over. The judges would thank her politely, tell her she'd hear back in a few weeks, and she'd leave knowing she'd played it safe. Knowing she'd let them box her into exactly what they expected. Maya's hands moved through the familiar closing phrase, but instead of playing the final chord, something shifted. Her fingers hesitated for just a fraction of a second, hovering over the keys. In that tiny pause, she made a decision that would change everything. Instead of ending the piece, she let her right hand drift up the keyboard, finding a different set of notes entirely. The gentle, simple melody of Mozart transformed into something darker, deeper, more complex. Her left hand joined in with a rolling bass line that seemed to come from somewhere deep in the earth. Dr. Hartwell's head snapped up. The pen in the male judge's hand stopped moving. The woman on the right sat forward in her chair, her boredom vanishing instantly. Maya was no longer playing the Mozart minuet. She was playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, one of the most technically demanding pieces ever written for piano. Musicians called it the H3, and they said it with a mixture of respect and fear. Professional pianists spent years preparing for it. Some never attempted it at all. And Maya was playing it from memory. Without sheet music, without permission, without anything but raw courage and the skill she'd built through thousands of hours of practice. Her fingers flew across the keys, navigating runs that required impossible speed and precision. The music exploded through the room, powerful and fierce, nothing like the quiet simplicity of what she'd been playing moments before. This was music that demanded attention, that grabbed you by the shoulders and refused to let go. The transition had been seamless, so smooth that for a moment the judges seemed unsure if this had been planned all along, but their faces showed the truth. This wasn't what they'd expected. This wasn't what they'd asked for, and it was absolutely extraordinary. Maya felt the music flowing through her, every note connected to something deeper than technique. Her hands knew where to go because she'd practiced this piece obsessively for the past year, working through it section by section in that church basement. Mrs. Rodriguez had told her she wasn't ready, that it was too advanced, but Maya had insisted. She'd needed to know she could do it. Needed to prove to herself that her circumstances didn't define her limits. The H3 was more than just difficult notes played quickly. It required an understanding of emotion, of storytelling through music. The piece moved from thunderous power to heartbreaking tenderness, from chaos to perfect clarity. It was a journey, and Maya poured everything she had into taking the judges along with her. Sweat formed on her forehead as she worked through a particularly challenging passage, her fingers stretching to reach chord progressions that seemed designed to be impossible. But she'd practiced these exact measures hundreds of times until her hands knew them, like they knew her own heartbeat. Behind her, she could sense the shift in the room's energy. The judges were no longer casual observers checking boxes on an evaluation form. They were listening. Really listening. She didn't dare look back, didn't dare break her concentration for even a second, but she could feel their attention like sunlight on her back. The music built toward one of the piece's most famous sections, a cascade of notes that descended like a waterfall, each one needing to be perfectly clear and perfectly timed. Maya had failed this part so many times in practice, her fingers tangling, the notes blurring together. But Mrs. Rodriguez had made her slow down, break it into tiny pieces, and rebuild it note by note. Now, in this moment, with everything on the line, Maya's fingers found their path. The cascade flowed perfectly, each note crystal clear, building momentum as it descended. She heard someone gasp behind her, the sharp intake of breath unmistakable in the otherwise silent room. But Maya couldn't think about that. She was lost in the music now, in the world Rachmaninoff had created over 100 years ago. A world where a person's worth wasn't determined by their address or their parents' jobs or the price of their clothes. A world where only the music mattered, where beauty and skill and passion spoke louder than any prejudice. Her hands moved through another complex section, the left hand playing a steady rhythm while the right hand wove intricate patterns above it. This was the conversation she couldn't have with words. This was her answer to every doubt, every dismissive look, every low expectation. The piece surged forward, growing more intense, more demanding. Maya's arms ached. Her back was tense. Her fingers were starting to tire. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop, not now. Not when she was finally showing them who she really was. What she was truly capable of when given the chance to be herself, instead of playing the role they'd assigned to her. The music filled every corner of the audition room, bouncing off the walls, making the air itself seem to vibrate. This was just the beginning. Maya had so much more to give. The music consumed everything. Maya's entire world had narrowed down to the piano keys beneath her fingers, and the sound filling the air around her. She was no longer thinking about the judges or the audition or what might happen next. There was only the music demanding everything she had to give. The Rach 3 moved into a quieter section now, a moment of tenderness after the storm of notes. Maya's touch softened, her fingers barely grazing the keys as she played a melody so delicate it seemed like it might break. This was the part that always made her think of her mother, the gentleness that existed even in the midst of exhaustion, the way she'd stroke Maya's hair after a long day and hum softly. But Rachmaninoff never let beauty rest for long. The gentle melody began to build again, gathering strength like a wave forming far out at sea. Maya's left hand started adding weight, depth, a darkness creeping in underneath the sweetness. Her right hand climbed higher up the keyboard, the notes becoming more urgent, more insistent. She was sweating now, really sweating. A drop ran down the side of her face, but she couldn't wipe it away. Her hands were too busy, racing across the keys, jumping between octaves, stretching to reach intervals that seemed designed to be just barely possible. Her forearms burned with the effort. The muscles in her back screamed for relief. But pain was just another sensation, something happening far away from where Maya actually was. She existed somewhere between the keys and the strings inside the piano, in that space where intention became sound, where feeling transformed into music that other people could hear and understand. The piece built toward one of its massive climaxes, the moment where both hands had to play thunderous chords that rang out like church bells. Maya threw her full weight into each chord, the way Mrs. Rodriguez had taught her, using her whole body instead of just her fingers. The piano responded with a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the walls. Through the corner of her eye, she caught movement. Dr. Hartwell had stood up from her chair, though Maya wasn't sure if the judge even realized she'd done it. The woman's hand was pressed against her chest, her mouth slightly open. The other two judges sat frozen, leaning so far forward they looked like they might fall out of their seats. But Maya couldn't focus on them. The music demanded her complete attention. She was approaching the most technically difficult section of the entire piece, a passage that professional pianists described as a nightmare. It required both hands to play rapid, complex patterns that moved in opposite directions, while still sounding coordinated and musical. Maya had spent 6 months just on this section. 6 months of practicing it slowly, gradually building up speed. 6 months of getting it wrong, her hands cramping, her confidence wavering. Mrs. Rodriguez had told her again and again that it was okay if she couldn't master it, that attempting it was already an achievement, but Maya had needed to get it right, needed to know that she could. Her hands positioned themselves and she took a breath so quick it was barely there at all. Then she launched into the passage, her fingers moving faster than seemed humanly possible. The notes poured out in a torrent, each hand playing its own intricate pattern while somehow creating a unified whole. Left hand ascending while the right descended, then switching, crossing over each other, weaving together like two dancers who knew each other's every move. It was working. She was actually doing it. The notes were clean and clear, not a single one muddied or missed. Maya felt a surge of something that wasn't quite joy because joy seemed too small a word. It was bigger than that, deeper, something like flying or breaking through a wall she'd been hitting her whole life. The music shifted again, moving into a section that required a different kind of skill. Not speed now, but emotion. The notes slowed down, became more spacious, leaving room for feeling to fill the gaps between them. This was where a pianist had to bare their soul, had to let the audience see what lived inside them. Maya thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The first time she'd heard piano music, standing outside that church when she was 8 years old, feeling like the sound was calling to her. The way her parents had looked at each other when she told them she wanted to learn, knowing it would be hard but finding a way to say yes. Every Thursday evening with Mrs. Rodriguez, working through pieces measure by measure, celebrating tiny victories and learning from countless mistakes. She thought about the kids at school who'd made fun of her dreams, telling her that people like her didn't become concert pianists, the college advisor who'd suggested she be realistic and choose a more practical career. The look in Dr. Hartwell's eyes just minutes ago when she'd asked Maya to play a children's piece, all of it poured into her fingers, into the keys, into the sound that filled the audition room. The sadness and the hope, the doubt and the determination, the fear and the courage, every emotion found its place in Rachmaninoff's music, like he'd written it specifically for this moment, for this girl, for this story. Tears started rolling down Maya's face. She didn't try to stop them. They were part of the music now, part of the truth she was telling through the piano. Her vision blurred, but her fingers knew where to go. They'd walked this path so many times before that they could find their way in the dark. The piece moved toward its final sections, the music becoming almost overwhelming in its intensity. This was the part where everything came together, where all the themes and melodies that had appeared throughout the piece returned, transformed, elevated, made new. Maya's hands raced across the entire length of the keyboard, from the deepest bass notes to the highest treble, covering what felt like impossible distances. Her whole body was involved now, swaying with the rhythm, leaning into the powerful sections, pulling back for the gentle moments. This was what Mrs. Rodriguez meant when she said that playing piano wasn't just about your hands. It was about your whole self. Every part of Maya was in this music. Every hope and dream and fear and victory. The sound filled not just the audition room but seemed to expand beyond it, as if the walls couldn't contain what was being created. This wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a statement, a declaration, a proof of existence. Maya was saying, "I am here, I am real, I am worth hearing." She could feel herself approaching the ending, that final magnificent cascade that would bring the piece to its conclusion. Her fingers were on fire, her arms trembling with exhaustion, but she had enough left. She had to have enough left. Not for the judges, not even for herself anymore, but for the music itself, because it deserved to be completed, to be honored, to be given everything. The notes built higher and higher, faster and faster, climbing toward that last peak. Maya's breath came in quick gasps. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Everything hurt, and everything felt perfect at the same time. Pain and joy mixed together until they became the same thing. She was almost there. Just a few more measures. Just a few more moments of giving absolutely everything she had, holding nothing back, leaving nothing in reserve. The music demanded all of her, and she was finally completely giving it. The final chord rang out, powerful and absolute. Maya's hands crashed down on the keys one last time, pouring every bit of remaining strength into that concluding moment. The sound filled the room like thunder, vibrating through the floor, through the bench, through her entire body. Then slowly it began to fade, the notes dissolving into the air until there was nothing left but silence. Maya sat perfectly still, her hands resting on the keys, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Sweat dripped down her temples. Her arms shook with exhaustion. She couldn't quite believe it was over, that she'd actually made it through all 18 minutes of one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire. The silence stretched on. Maya became aware of how quiet the room was, how complete the absence of sound felt after all that music. Slowly, reality began creeping back in. The audition room. The judges. What she'd just done. Oh no. The realization hit her like cold water. She'd completely ignored their instructions. They'd asked for Mozart's Minuet, a simple beginner's piece, and she'd played Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto instead. She'd broken the rules, gone against what they'd specifically requested. They probably thought she was arrogant, disrespectful, some kid who couldn't follow basic directions. Maya's hands slipped off the keys and fell into her lap. She was afraid to turn around, afraid to see the anger on their faces. They were going to throw her out. Maybe they'd even report her for wasting their time. Her chance at Thornfield, at a scholarship, at any kind of future in music, it was gone. She'd destroyed it with her own hands. Her eyes stung with fresh tears, but these were different from the ones she'd cried while playing. Those had been tears of passion, of pouring herself into something beautiful. These were tears of fear and regret. She had to face them, had to apologize. Maybe if she explained herself well enough, they wouldn't be too harsh. Maybe they'd at least let her leave with some dignity. Maya turned around slowly on the piano bench, Dr. Hartwell stood behind the judge's table, one hand still pressed against her chest. Her face was wet with tears that streaked down her cheeks, ruining her makeup. The stern, composed woman who had barely looked at Maya when she entered the room was crying openly, not bothering to wipe her eyes. The male judge beside her had his head in his hands. His shoulders shook slightly. The woman on the right stared at Maya with an expression that was hard to read, her mouth open, her eyes wide and glistening. Nobody spoke. The silence was somehow louder than the music had been. Then Dr. Hartwell started clapping. Her hands came together once, twice, the sound sharp and clear in the quiet room. The other judges immediately stood up and joined her. The male judge was nodding his head, still wiping his eyes with one hand while he clapped with the other. The woman on the right clapped so hard it looked like it might hurt. The applause filled the room, echoing off the walls. It went on, and Maya just sat there on the piano bench, completely frozen, unable to process what was happening. They weren't angry. They were applauding. For her. Dr. Hartwell held up a hand, and the other judges gradually stopped clapping, though they remained standing. The older woman walked around the table and approached the piano. Maya instinctively straightened up, her heart hammering again for completely different reasons now. "Stand up, please," Dr. Hartwell said, her voice thick with emotion. Maya stood on shaky legs, her knees feeling like they might give out at any moment. She was eye level with Dr. Hartwell now, close enough to see that the woman's hands were trembling slightly. "What's your teacher's name?" Dr. Hartwell asked. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Maya answered quietly. "She teaches at New Hope Community Church." Dr. Hartwell nodded slowly as if confirming something to herself. "And how long have you been working on that piece?" "The Rachmaninoff?" "About a year, ma'am. Mrs. Rodriguez said I wasn't ready, but I wanted to try anyway." A smile flickered across Dr. Hartwell's face, sad and knowing at the same time. She was wrong. "You were ready?" She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "Do you know why I asked you to play the Mozart minuet?" Maya shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Because when I looked at you," Dr. Hartwell continued, her voice growing softer, "I saw a girl from a modest background, taught by a church pianist, and I assumed that was all you could be. I looked at your folder, your clothes, where you came from, and I made a judgment about your abilities before you'd played a single note." The male judge had joined them now, standing a respectful distance away. "We all did," he admitted. "We see hundreds of auditions every year, and we thought we knew what to expect." Dr. Hartwell reached out and gently touched Maya's shoulder. "I need to tell you something. When I was 17 years old, I stood in a room very much like this one. I came from a poor family in Detroit. My father was a janitor. My mother cleaned houses. I learned piano from a neighbor who gave lessons in her apartment, and I practiced on an old upright that was missing 3 keys. Maya's eyes widened. She couldn't imagine the distinguished Dr. Hartwell, head of admissions at one of the world's most prestigious conservatories, coming from circumstances like that. The judges at my audition looked at me the same way I just looked at you. Dr. Hartwell continued. They asked me to play something simple, assuming I couldn't handle more. I was too intimidated to do what you just did. I played what they asked, and I barely got accepted. It took me years to overcome the damage that moment did to my confidence. She stepped back slightly, looking Maya directly in the eyes. What you just did, it was brave. It was necessary. You showed us exactly who you are, and you didn't let us diminish you. Her voice cracked slightly. Thank you for that reminder. Thank you for being braver than I was. Maya felt tears running down her face again. She tried to speak but couldn't find the words. The woman judge approached now too, a tissue in her hand that she offered to Maya. That was the most extraordinary audition I've witnessed in 15 years of doing this job, she said. The technical mastery was remarkable, but it was more than that. You played with your whole heart. We felt every single emotion. Where did you practice? The male judge asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. That piece requires hours of daily work. Do you have a piano at home? No, sir, Maya said, finally finding her voice. I practice at the church. They let me come in whenever it's open. Sometimes I practice on a paper keyboard at home, just moving my fingers, going through the motions. The 3 judges exchanged looks that Maya couldn't quite interpret. Dr. Hartwell shook her head slowly, a mix of admiration and disbelief on her face. You learned to play Rachmaninoff's 3rd piano concerto on a church piano and a paper keyboard, she said, as if saying it out loud would help her believe it. Mrs. Rodriguez helped me, Maya added quickly. She's an amazing teacher. She believes in me even when things seem impossible. Dr. Hartwell smiled again, warmer this time. She's clearly an exceptional teacher and you're an exceptional student. She glanced at the other judges who both nodded. Maya, I can't make you any promises right now. We have a process to follow, official procedures. But I want you to know something. She paused, making sure Maya was really listening. You belong here, not because of where you come from or who your teacher is or what you wore to this audition. You belong here because of what you just showed us. That kind of talent, that kind of dedication, that kind of courage. Those are things that can't be taught. Those are things you either have or you don't. And you have them. Maya couldn't stop crying now. All the fear, all the tension, all the years of doubt and struggle were pouring out of her. But these were good tears, the kind that came from being seen, really seen for the first time. 3 months later, Maya stood in front of a brick dormitory building with 2 suitcases at her feet. The September air was crisp and cool, carrying the smell of autumn leaves and new beginnings. Students walked past her in both directions, some carrying boxes, others laughing with friends, all of them looking like they belonged in this world. She still couldn't quite believe she was here. The acceptance letter had arrived 6 weeks after her audition, but it wasn't just any acceptance letter. It was a full scholarship, covering tuition, room, board, and even a stipend for books and supplies. Her mother had cried when they opened it together. Her father had picked Maya up and spun her around like she was 5 years old again, laughing and crying at the same time. Need help with those bags? Maya turned to see a girl about her age with bright purple streaks in her hair and a friendly smile. She wore ripped jeans and a Thornfield Conservatory sweatshirt. I'm okay, thanks, Maya said, then reconsidered. Actually, yes. That would be great. The girl grabbed one of the suitcases. I'm Wei, piano major 2nd year. You're a freshman? Yeah, Maya, also piano. Oh, you're that Maya, Wei said, her eyes lighting up. Everyone's been talking about you. The audition that made Dr. Hartwell cry. That's legendary. Maya felt her cheeks warm. I didn't mean to make her cry. I just played. Wei laughed as they walked toward the entrance. Well, whatever you did, it worked. Come on, I'll show you where your room is. The dormitory was nothing fancy, but to Maya it felt like a palace. She had her own small room with a bed, a desk, and a tiny closet. Through the window she could see the practice building where rows of piano rooms waited, each one soundproofed and equipped with a quality instrument. No more waiting for the church to be open, no more practicing in the cold because the heating didn't work well. She would have access to pianos whenever she wanted. Over the next few weeks, Maya threw herself into her studies. Her classes were harder than anything she'd experienced before. Music theory, ear training, piano technique, music history. The other students had vocabularies she didn't know, referenced composers she'd never heard of, discussed concepts that were completely foreign to her, but she worked harder than anyone. While others went to parties or relaxed on weekends, Maya was in a practice room, methodically building her foundation, filling in the gaps in her knowledge. Mrs. Rodriguez had taught her well, but there was so much more to learn. Dr. Hartwell kept her promise, too. She became Maya's mentor, meeting with her once a week to discuss her progress and guide her development. In those meetings, Maya learned that Dr. Hartwell saw something of herself in Maya, a determination to succeed despite starting behind others, a refusal to let circumstances define limits. You remind me why I do this job, Dr. Hartwell said one afternoon in her office. It's easy to get caught up in pedigrees and resumes and forget that real talent can come from anywhere. One evening in late October, Maya received an email that made her heart skip. The conservatory was hosting a showcase concert featuring exceptional students and they wanted her to perform. The piece they suggested? Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, accompanied by the conservatory's orchestra. Maya called Mrs. Rodriguez immediately, her hands shaking as she held the phone. A full orchestra? Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was filled with joy and pride. Oh, my dear, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. I'm terrified, Maya admitted. What if I mess up? What if I freeze? Then you'll be human, Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. Maya, you've already done the hardest part. You've already proven you belong there. Now you just need to do what you've always done. Play with your heart. The weeks leading up to the concert were intense. Practicing with an orchestra was completely different from playing solo. Maya had to learn to coordinate with dozens of other musicians, to follow the conductor's lead, to blend her sound with the larger ensemble while still making her voice heard. There were moments of doubt, times when she wanted to quit, when the pressure felt like too much. But then she'd think about her parents, saving every penny so she could have this chance. She'd think about Mrs. Rodriguez, who never charged full price because she believed in investing in potential. She'd think about Dr. Hartwell, who saw her own younger self in Maya's struggle. The night of the concert arrived. Maya stood backstage in a simple black dress that Dr. Hartwell had helped her pick out. Through the curtain, she could hear the audience filing in, the rustle of programs, the low murmur of conversation. Her parents were out there somewhere, sitting in the audience of a prestigious concert hall for the first time in their lives. Mrs. Rodriguez, too, who had closed her church lessons early to make the drive. 5 minutes, a stagehand announced. Maya's hands were ice cold. Her heart raced. She closed her eyes and took deep breaths, trying to center herself the way her meditation teacher had shown her in wellness class. "You ready?" She opened her eyes to find Dr. Hartwell standing beside her, elegant in a dark suit. "I think so," Maya said. "I'm nervous." "Good," Dr. Hartwell said. "Nerves mean you care. They'll keep you sharp." She placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "Remember something, Maya. You're not the girl who walked into that audition room trying to prove she belonged. You are the girl who played Rachmaninoff when they asked for Mozart. You are brave. You are talented. And you absolutely belong on that stage." The orchestra was already seated when Maya walked out. The conductor, a distinguished older man with wild gray hair, smiled warmly at her as she approached the piano. The audience applauded, and Maya caught a glimpse of her parents in the third row, her mother already wiping tears from her eyes. She sat at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. The orchestra members raised their instruments ready. The conductor lifted his baton, his eyes meeting Maya's. She nodded. The music began. This time was different from the audition. She wasn't playing to prove anything or to fight against anyone's expectations. She was playing because she loved it, because this was who she was, because the music itself deserved to be honored and shared. The orchestra surrounded her with sound, supporting her, challenging her, dancing with her through every phrase. Her hands moved across the keys with confidence born from hundreds of hours of additional practice. The difficult passages she'd struggled with before now felt natural, like conversations with old friends. When she reached the tender middle section, she thought about all the people who had helped her get here, her parents' sacrifices, Mrs. Rodriguez's faith, Dr. Hartwell's second chance, Way's friendship, every teacher who'd taken extra time to help her catch up. They were all part of this music, woven into every note. The final cascade approached, that waterfall of notes that had once seemed impossible. Maya's fingers flew across the keys, each note crystal clear, building toward the triumphant conclusion. The orchestra swelled behind her, everyone moving together toward the same glorious ending. The final chord rang out, powerful and perfect. For a moment there was silence. Then the audience erupted. People stood applauding and cheering. Maya rose from the piano bench, overwhelmed. The conductor was grinning, gesturing for her to take a bow. The orchestra members tapped their stands with their bows, the musicians' gesture of respect. Through the lights, Maya found her parents. Her father was standing, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Her mother was crying, just completely crying, her whole face lit up with joy. Next to them, Mrs. Rodriguez stood with her hands clasped together, nodding as if to say, "Yes, I knew you could." Dr. Hartwell sat in the front row, a slight smile on her face, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Maya bowed again, her own tears flowing freely now. This wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning. She had years of study ahead, mountains of challenges to overcome, so much still to learn and prove. But in this moment, standing on this stage, she understood something fundamental. She hadn't changed who she was to get here. She'd stayed true to herself, played her own masterpiece instead of the simple tune others expected. And that choice, that moment of courage in an audition room 3 months ago, had opened up a world she'd only dreamed about. The applause continued. Maya looked out at all those faces, strangers and loved ones alike, all of them brought together by music. By her music, she thought about the girl she'd been, nervous and uncertain, clutching a worn folder on a bus. That girl was still here, still part of who she was, but now she was so much more. She was Maya Chen, piano student at Thornfield Conservatory. She was a musician, an artist, someone who belonged, and this was only the beginning.